Welcome to Ed Family and welcome to AAPI or Asian American Pacific Islander Heritage Month. And I have a interesting episode for you today. Brian On, a doctoral student at Columbia Teachers College University, is doing research on Asian Americans who have impacted Orange County across the decades and named a couple of important folks in his research, including Mr. Alan Wu, Mr. Ken Inoue of JACL, Miss Marianne Fu of Okapaka, and Superintendent Michael Matsuda of the Anaheim Union High School District. And somehow I also got to be a part of this research and present with these esteemed leaders at the Transformative Leadership Conference last month. And what was my topic? It was on the Asian American Studies and Korean American Studies ethnic courses, which I've helped to author for our district. And so a number of these folks were interviewed, and I was also interviewed by Alan Wu, Deputy Director of Santa Ana Unidos and Trustee of Colorado College. Why? Because of this course, Asian American Studies, where I had the opportunity to share a little bit of that why and a little bit of my story and communicating with others how valuable it is to help students to know and tell their story. Hello, my name is Dr. Jeff Kim, National Board Certified Teacher, middle and high school teacher, instructional coach, and civic lead in Anaheim Union High School District, and also adjunct faculty at Cal State University Fullerton.
Hey, you're doing a interesting workshop in April that is going to be teaching Asian American teachers to teach Asian American study. Why are you guys doing that at this time?
You know, it's such a wonderful opportunity to give students the opportunity to know their story, tell their story, listen to others with empathy and respect, and then to do something good with that story. So when I think about ethnic studies, I see that as an opportunity to draw from our stories of resilience, draw from our history as we look forward and make a difference for the United States.
When did you become aware of your history and your story, and how did that begin to start formulating to where it led to your career, if that did at all?
You know, that's a great question. When I grew up in all my K through 12 education, I never had a teacher that looked like me, and I never learned my story. And it wasn't until college, actually, that I learned about my Asian American story. And that's where I majored in Asian American Studies, and I'm so glad that I did. Because I think every young person is asking that question, who am I? And when I was not given the opportunity to know my story, I realized, wow, I'm missing out on the opportunity to receive this generational resilience that I could have learned from Korean Americans, Japanese Americans, and Chinese Americans, and many other ethnic minorities as well. I never had that opportunity to learn that story. But I want to not have the next generation have the same experience. I want to pass the baton to benefit the future.
We're lumping together in this little demographic thing called Asian and Pacific Islander American. You're Korean and Korean American. So tell us a little about what we need to know about that.
So when I think about the Korean American story, first of all, it's focusing on the American story, Korean American. But there are some unique things that allow the Korean American, it's a story like many others in many ways, but it's a story like no other at the same time. If you look at the Korean American Ethnic Studies model curriculum, you'll see stories of Dosan An Chang-ho, Dr. Sammy Lee, and so many others who made a difference for the United States. If I were to ask others, tell me about one Korean American that has impacted the United States, or one Asian American, for example, that has impacted the United States, many Americans would struggle to name even one. And when students do not know the story of even one, or adults for that matter don't even know the story of one, it doesn't mean they are ignorant and don't know anything. What actually that means is because we see a lot of Asians in media and Asian Americans in media, but typically portrayed in a certain kind of way, what they have in them are the stereotypes, biases, caricatures, and from there, if it doesn't lead to stereotyping, then it'll lead to sometimes hate, as we've seen the surge in anti-Asian racism.
The one Korean is many Koreans stand out in my mind, but Colonel Kim was one of them, who led a Japanese American unit in the Army, and he was one of my mentors. And I think the story that I like about that is that while we are Korean American, uh, we're American, but we're also not defined by any of that, you know, because all the experiences come together. Was there a critical period where you saw that you just couldn't stand by and witness the events that was happening to our community, and that you felt that you now need to be a part of the change and transformation?
First of all, thank you for mentioning Colonel Young-Oh Kim.
Yeah.
At that time, there was a lot of tension between Korea and Japan at the time, Korea being colonized. But that's different from being a Korean American and a Japanese American. And he really said something really profound. So when he got in charge of this very famous 442nd unit, he said, they were asking him, "Are you sure you want to be the leader of this group?" Being a Korean American leading Japanese Americans. And he said, "I'm an American, they're Americans, we'll fight as Americans." And this isn't just a Korean American story. This is a great American story. This is a great story to be told to the world. So of course we want to highlight this. Now you're asking also about is there something that caused me to want to tell these stories? I have to say, I'm not one of those people that has been doing this all my life. So there was a critical moment actually. Very recently, we've been facing two pandemics in our country: the pandemic of COVID-19 and also the pandemic of the surge in anti-Asian racism. Now, for me, I just kind of internalized it at first because I've been called names all my life, and so I don't know if I'm numb to it or what, but maybe I shouldn't be, but I was, and so I really didn't speak up if I did hear things. But when a young student came up to me and said, "I'm really scared. I'm really scared about this surge," that did move me, and I felt like I wanted to do something about it, but even then I couldn't give the right answer. You know what I told that student? I told that student, it's going to be okay. We live in California. There are a lot of Asian Americans here in California. I don't expect that to be an issue at all. And I was wrong. OC Human Relations reports a 1,800% increase in hate incidents toward Asian Americans during the season. And so I asked my students at that time during the pandemic, there's this campaign with OC Human Relations called Know Better, No Hate, K-N-O-W, No Hate, N-O, Hate. And they created all kinds of PSAs and artwork to address this surge in anti-Asian racism. I was so proud of them. And I don't know, there was a part of me that kind of expected it not to continue. But it just got worse. And it wasn't just name calling and things like that. I saw elderly folks, people that look like my parents, being beaten very badly, some even killed. And then when the 6 women were murdered in Atlanta, I knew I could not be silent on this issue anymore. When that event happened, I couldn't go to sleep. In fact, I was in bed, but I couldn't go to sleep. And I actually went down to my computer and I started writing the course for Asian American Studies because I knew these stories needed to be told. And I knew when the stories were told and when the children told the stories, it would benefit them because it would be a story of resilience and it would benefit all America.
You, through your job, and because your school district embraces what you are doing, because you have a superintendent that does that. But we are also facing an America that is trying to erase our history because they feel that we don't look like them. We're not American enough. We're foreigners. And that's the background for the Asian hate. Now, you have to interact with them. I'm pretty sure you go to conferences where you meet people from other districts as you're trying to teach them that, hey, this is just our story. This is not about hating you. What is the hardest part of that job in terms of talking to people like that?
I think oftentimes when people don't want to talk about these kinds of things, they're speaking out from a place of fear. And so one act that can counteract that fear is compassion and love. And in our district, we do have civic engagement and learning. About 16 of our schools are California democracy schools. And what that means is when a student comes to one of our schools in the Anaheim Union High School District,
they're not just going to learn about civics, but they're going to actually take action, and compassionate action at that. I know when I say civics, it can sound political, but when we talk about civics, it's not necessarily a political thing. It's elevating student voice. It's talking about student choice. It's building students, giving students the opportunity to share their passions, giving them a purpose. And when we frame it in this kind of way, that we're just wanting students to know their stories, to tell their stories, to have others listen with empathy and respect, and then to do something good with their stories, isn't that a beautiful thing? That's a beautiful thing that our country needs. And we need to hear this from many people, many different groups, many of these different kind of stories, because we live in a great country where we are culturally blessed. So how can we be culturally honoring to these many groups and allow these stories to be shared, to live out what it says in our Constitution? Even at the very beginning, I think there was this understanding that we weren't perfect. So there was this desire to make a more perfect union. And through the course of our American history, I think there are places where we recognize we weren't where we wanted to be. And there's also this understanding that we want to constantly aspire for more and be better for the next generation. How better than to have students know their stories, tell their stories, and do something good with their stories?
You mentioned fear earlier, the fear from the student, the fear from seniors being attacked by the violence. And the fear of those that oppress because they fear our empowerment, our unity, and that we can stand up and say, I will not be beaten. These are all connected by fear. Okay. Fear to control. Those that fear become silent and docile. How do you overcome fear? You mentioned compassion. Do you really believe that that's the key? I know that that's what your superintendent Matsuda has said, that I want to teach my teachers to teach with compassion. What led you guys to that? I don't understand that.
I definitely believe in compassion, and compassion being the way. Love is the way. And so whether it was beginning with that PAL class and giving the students the opportunity to have kindness and compassion to others, I know our superintendent Matsuda, this is very close to his heart. He was good friends with Mayor Tate. Anaheim City is known as a city of kindness. And this is a high value for not just Mayor Tate, but for our superintendent and all of us. And his leadership is a reflection of what we all aspire to be as well. When I see Superintendent Matsuda, I know a lot of educators, but he's the only Asian American superintendent that I know. And so I'm so proud to see someone that looks like me in a role where he's able to, through compassion, be an example for others. And through that, all of us have the opportunity also to model it as well.
So transformation happens when we change people. Can you think of an instance because of what you're teaching and the way you're working with your students that is transforming their life and making a difference?
Absolutely. I think when students, once again, know their story, tell their story, and have others listen with empathy and respect, and once again, this might be the first time that is happening in their lives. In our district, we encourage our teachers to know our students by their name, need, assets, and stories. But I've always asked, what if they don't know their own story? So when they're empowered with their own story, and they've told it, and they realize, wow, others are listening with empathy and respect, and they see perhaps in places where they can be a light, then they go to those spaces, they find issues that they care about, and then they do good in those places. They show compassion, and they act out in good ways.
So do you see yourself now as a leader for social justice, or do you see yourself as something else?
You know, whatever word you use, as a leader for social justice or compassion, I think when you go in this way, it's going to bring light and help in so many different areas. Ultimately, what I want to do is raise the voices of our students and elevate their voices, give them a chance to not only learn about civics, but to practice it. And as they practice it, they're going to bring about great change, great social justice, great change through them. So my job is just to give them the skills, equip them, and as they go out, they're going to care about a lot of different issues and do something good with it.
Is there anything else that you want to leave a message for other educators around the world that will be seeing this video?
You know, I'm sitting in this room with Alan Wu and Ken Inoue. They are folks who have been a part of this good work for such a long time, and folks that I needed to look up to, like Superintendent Matsuda. And so when I see these role models, then I know that I too need to carry this baton and pass it forward. So for whoever's watching this video, what I encourage you to do is, if there's a baton that you've received today, carry it forward.
Say something in Korean, just for fun.
안녕히 계세요.